Good afternoon and welcome to the Ocean Future Society Virtual Film Festival. My name is Jim Knowlton, I'll be your host. The Ocean Future Society Virtual Film Festival is a new platform where you can see Ocean Future Society films like Keiko, Born to be Wild, Keiko, Gate to Freedom, My Father the Captain, Jacques-Yves Cousteau, and Swain's Island, One of the Last Jewels of the Planet. In the past, you probably would have had to have turned into a particular channel at a certain date and time so that you could see these films, and if you missed it, you might have to wait quite a while to see it again. But today, with new technology, we can present these films on pay-per-view. We hope you will tune in to see them, and we appreciate your support at Ocean Future Society and for independent film. Today's presenters are Jean-Michel Cousteau, president of Ocean Future Society. He's the executive producer of My Father the Captain, and he is the son of Jacques Cousteau. We also have Céline Cousteau, who is the founder and director of Cause-Centric Productions. And she is the daughter of Jean-Michel and the granddaughter of Jacques Cousteau. She's also in My Father the Captain. We'll play clips of the show today, and Jean-Michel and Céline will discuss them, and that will take about 30 minutes. And then after that, we'll have about a 30-minute question and answer session. So if you'd like to ask questions, there is a question box on the screen, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can at the end. Both Jean-Michel and Céline are celebrating this year. Jean-Michel is celebrating his 75th year of scuba diving. Jean-Michel likes to tell the story. When he was 7 years old, his father put a tank on his back and pushed him overboard. So 75 years makes Jean-Michel the diver who's been diving the longest ever. Céline is celebrating the release of her film, Tribes on the Edge, about the plight of the indigenous of the Amazon rainforest, on iTunes and Amazon. So congratulations to you both. I think to start off the event, it'd be nice to present a clip from the beginning of the show that helps put the program, My Father the Captain, in context. So I will do that now.
Jacques Cousteau was also my father. And at the 100th anniversary of his birth, I'm honored to revisit the adventure and the legacy he left, not only to his heirs, but to us all. I want to remind us that he was a pioneer and a visionary. I want to hear from those who listened to him, were inspired, and are still working to better our world. To honor his 100th birthday, members of the original team of Calypso will join me and my son and daughter, Fabien and Céline, to dive off the coast of France, where it all began. We'll share memories, tell stories, describe the inspiration and the influence. The time has come for me to share with you the adventure of My Father the Captain, Jacques-Yves Cousteau.
Now I would like to welcome Jean-Michel and Céline. I'm going to bring them on their cameras back. Hello, Céline, and let's see, Jean-Michel. I'm going to ask you to unmute your microphone. Hi, Céline.
How are you, Jim?
I'm doing great.
I know he's there. I've seen him.
See, I will asking Jean-Michel to start his camera. There he is. And let's see if I can get his microphone going. Can you talk, Jean-Michel?
I think so.
Oh, there we go.
Salut, mon père. Oh, I'm going to lip read now.
So Jean-Michel, we're gonna ask to unmute your microphone. Sorry for the delay, folks. This is the beauty of a live event.
Is that it?
Hey, there we go.
Perfect.
So wonderful to have you both here to talk about the film and your recent work. And Jean-Michel, so My Father the Captain was a film you wanted to make to honor your dad's 100th birthday and the legacy that he left. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Oh yeah, for me it was a very exciting time, not only because we were celebrating his 100th birthday, but that gave us an opportunity to gather the entire team of the people who are still alive and that have made what my father wanted to do all the time, which was to explore the world. And thanks to those people, they joined us to go on that expedition or that celebration. And it was very, very emotional for me. And I will never forget that. And some of those people I'm still in touch with. And of course, Céline and Fabien were there. And that was an opportunity to kind of pass on the baton to the next generation.
That's great, Céline. And you were on that dive too, on the Grand Conglou, which was a site near the south of France where maybe a Roman ship 2,000 years ago sank, and Calypso did a dive on there in the 50s to recover lots of amphora. And you guys dived on the same site.
It was the first time I had gone diving on that site. So for me, it was a return to history and being a witness to that more in the philosophical sense. But diving with my father and others from Calypso, the Anciens de Calypso, the original divers, was just really emotional and an amazing opportunity to celebrate the work of my family and, of course, of my grandfather.
That's great.
Oh, it was a very special opportunity. And to bring back those people where everything fundamentally started, where we were recovering amphoras, which were 2,000 years old, and some of them still had wine and oil in them. That was amazing. And it's in a museum now. It was coming from the Grand Conglou near Marseille.
You know what I think was really special about doing this film, obviously, you know, to celebrate my grandfather's history and his life, but also put it in the context of today and all of these figures that were in the film and the work that he had done and the legacy that was passed on to my father and others was really embodied in this film. And to be a witness to that, I think, is really special.
Well, what do you think, Jim? Maybe we can play the next pictures or video.
That's great. And I'll let you tell the story of your family.
Well, that was a great opportunity to not only very young, started diving when I was 7 and then find myself on Calypso. And here's the family where you have my dad, my mother, my late brother, myself, and my cousin Jean-Pierre, who was a doctor and took care of my dad before he passed away, and we're still in touch today. It was an amazing, amazing time, and I really, really like to be doing this. So I want to see these pictures. You can see more pictures. There you go. That's when I started diving, a few years older. And my dad who set up the equipment to make sure it was there. Then he keeps going on. And here the family, my mother, my late brother, my dad, and myself, we are together diving. This was a very, very exciting moment for me, much more even now than in those times, because that was the beginning of my 75 years of scuba diving.
I think why this photograph in particular is interesting is, if you put it back in the context of when it was taken, I mean, the first family of divers, my grandmother was the first female diver. And we perhaps don't think of all of those things because now we might take it for granted that scuba diving and scuba technology has advanced to a certain point, but to look at this image is to see the beginning of that history, and to have an underwater image of it is also very special. I mean, I love this. It's like a family outing, except it's our family and it's underwater.
That was a great time, and I will never forget what my mother did. And maybe we can see the next video. Yeah. So, what about the next video? In the early days, if I'm not mistaken, my father wanted to film people who started spearfishing, but they could dive much deeper, much faster, longer, and my dad could not get the magic moment of spearfishing. And that's when he was very frustrated. And thanks to my mother, she spoke to her dad, who was the director of Air Liquide. He had been in French naval officer for many years, going around the world on ships. And he knew what my father wanted to do. So he introduced him to an engineer, and that engineer is Émile Gagnon. And I'd like to see those pictures to share with you the fact that they were spearfishing. And then Émile Gagnon was introduced to my father, and he's the one who, together with my dad, created the demand valve, or the regulator, if you want to call it that way, which gave a chance to my dad to say, as long as he wanted to be underwater, because he could not stay as long as everybody else, because he had a major accident with his car when he was in the Navy, and he almost lost an arm. It was all broken. They repaired it, and he was going to be able to go scuba diver thanks to all that equipment. And that's because my mother made the right introduction. So that was the beginning of that amazing adventure. And I will never forget that my dad was able to dive with a tank, and the next show can show you now. He's putting the regulator in his mouth, and now he's going to go diving. It's a very, very important time historically, and they could see fish that they could never see before. It was amazing, and they could still see shipwrecks which had sunk, and nobody was paying attention in those days. Now we are able to remove these pictures, which are historical, and share with the public a lot more information than we used to in those days. So all of that literally did bring us to years later, where my dad wanted to go and explore other parts of the world. And they were having a hard time. And amazingly, he met a gentleman from England who said, "Oh, you want a ship? Well, maybe we can do something about that." And that's when he literally spoke to my dad. And here's Calypso, which was a minesweeper, which has been built in the United States, in Oregon, out of local wood. And there were 5 or 6 of them. And it was Calypso number 3, and there was Calypso 1, 2. And he managed to make that available to my dad. And he said, provided that you create a not-for-profit organization and you give me a symbolic compensation of 1 franc, it was francs in those days, a franc a year, and you can have this boat. And that's when Calypso came into the picture. And I'd like to show you more pictures because from there, all the repair that was made, we became to that vessel where ultimately we had a helicopter on the board and the diving equipment and submersibles on board. And we could accommodate, I'll say 25 people maximum. And what's amazing, as you just see now, the person who moved on board was my mother, and she moved on the ship, and she's been living on Calypso more than my father, my brother, and myself together. Calypso was her home, and the people on Calypso loved her. You remember in those days with no connections with the rest of the world, when you were gone for weeks or months, and they would confide on her about their personal history, all kinds of things, and she kept that personally and did everything she could to help everyone on board. That was a very, very exciting time. And Simone Cousteau, of course, was a very important part of the team. And here she is on board with my dad and with one of her favorite dogs, one of the first ones, Scaf, for Scaphandrier. I remember playing with that little dog, and he lived there for, I don't know, 10 years or so, 15 years. And then she replaced it by somebody else when he passed away. That was an amazing time, and I will never forget.
It's, I mean, seeing this and hearing my dad, you know, there's always the unspoken voices and the behind the scenes part of the story. And the way I equate my grandfather's story is that he was the tip of the iceberg. But what is below the surface is much wider in expanse than we can even imagine. And part of that story, part of what enabled him to be what he was, is all of that crew, is everybody on Calypso. And my grandmother never wanted to be in front of the camera, but she wanted to be, as you said, Papa, she was always aboard Calypso because that was her first home. But she did it her way. And I feel that to not talk about her story is to neglect a huge part of what enabled my grandfather to be what he was. And that she was, in her time, also a true pioneer. There weren't women doing what she was doing, but she did it for the love of that life and not for the limelight of it. And I think, you know, we're learning now a lot more. And I mean, we knew, but we're sharing with people a lot more about that story. Just as a small example, she was the first women diver, and she was brought in as a member of the Women Divers Hall of Fame as the first female diver. So I think that acknowledgement is really important in her role in that whole story.
Céline, I don't know if you know that story, but when my father was testing the equipment, the regulator and everything, it was in Paris because the engineer, Émile Gagnon, was in Paris. And so they were testing things, and they had to, when they had the equipment, they had to go somewhere. And there's a river, which is called the Marne River. Yeah. And that's where my dad sent my mother there to test the equipment. And I remind you that he sent her there, and jokingly I said, because it was a polluted river, and he wanted to know if she could come back.
You know, you did something similar with Fabien and I in the Amazon. So my dad had this theory that caiman, crocodiles, don't bite humans underwater. The caimans in the Amazon. And he said, okay, well, we're going to film caimans, but the two of you go first. Let's test this theory.
That's fine.
And we were all fine. Now I see where you get it. Okay, I'm writing this in my family history book.
Well, it was a fascinating time because we were able together to, as a family, to go on board Calypso in different parts of the world. But it was decided, and I have to say, thanks to Ted Turner, we were allowed and able to financially to go in the Amazon. And Calypso was gone for almost 2 years.
Mm.
And well, what do we do with your mother and the children? Well, they were taken on board Calypso, and my grandmother, I mean your grandmother, was keeping on you and Fabien when I could go somewhere else with member of the team, because when Calypso was in the Amazon, there are many places where we couldn't go because it was not deep enough. So we would take a little boat and we would disappear for a day, a week, 10 days, and come back and reconnect with Calypso. So you were left on the ship most of the time, but I've seen you, and I don't know if you had a permit to do that, driving a boat in the river. But anyway, that was an amazing time.
There were no witnesses to my boat driving at 9 years old, so we were fine. No, that was an essential turning point in my life and in my childhood. Flying down with Gic, boarding Calypso, Moni, my grandmother was already there. Papa, you were on a raft somewhere with Fabien. Maman was somewhere else in the jungle on a land expedition. And so I was under the care of my grandparents. And I remember really well those 2 weeks spent aboard and all of the different little details of the things that I witnessed in terms of, you know, just walking on a sandbank and thousands of little brown gray frogs jumping around my feet, or walking into the jungle to buy bananas from a man literally in the middle of the jungle, nothing else. And there's a man sitting on the shore with a bunch of bananas. And being a witness to all that and absorbing it as a child, you absorb it for what it is without the intellectual analysis of what's going on in terms of climate and people. You're just really just living the moment. But obviously it has stayed with me.
Happened to you? Something happened to you?
Something happened to me. I keep going back to the Amazon. We went back. This might be a good time, Tim, if you want to switch to the to showing some of the other content, photos of my father, myself, and the expedition in the Amazon. But this link that happened for me when we went to the Amazon has come back. Papa, you and I went again in 2006 and 2007 to do Return to the Amazon for PBS, which was a part of a series called Ocean Adventures. And we went back, so this is some 25 years after that original expedition. And thanks to the work that you did, we were able to go back and explore places that Gic had been in the early 80s, and to really document the difference of then and now in the ecosystem, and with the people and the species, and obviously in the context of climate change as well. It was then that I met the people of the Javari territory. 2007, my dad sends me in, this is in the Brazilian Amazon, he sends me in to negotiate bringing the team into this, to the indigenous territory. I was a little younger in that photo than 9, but yeah, that puts the context. But so we were negotiating to bring the team into the Javari territory, again, to go back where Gic had gone, and that expedition. And it was then that we filmed a meeting, a conference of all of the contacted peoples of the Javari territory, which was an incredible opportunity. That was in the mess hall.
Where's the boss?
Yeah, there's the boss. There's the boss. It's fun, you know. It's interesting. In the public eye, Moni, my grandmother, was one specific type of person. But she was always just my grandmother. And I just remember, you know, her watching over me when I was aboard Calypso, and, you know, eating in the mess hall and being seated between my grandfather and my grandmother. And I remember a big piece of lettuce. This is just an off story, but a big piece of lettuce on my plate, and they were watching how I folded it, because you're not supposed to cut your lettuce. It's not proper. And I felt their eyes on me as I was folding the lettuce, and then the little nod of approval when I got it right.
All right.
So Calypso wasn't just an expedition ship. It was also, it was educational territory as well.
Well, you have images from your adventure?
Say again, Papa?
Do you have any images of?
Yeah, so we, so just as an introduction to, I'm going to show you guys a trailer of Tribes on the Edge, which is the feature film that Jim mentioned at the top of the show, which just came out last week on iTunes, Amazon, and a lot of other SVOD platforms, streaming platforms in the US. Thank you. It's a 10-year project. My father knows this well. So upon meeting the people of the Javari territory in 2007, I knew I wanted to do something more than what we had done. And it came to me in an email from Beto of the Marubo tribe, who asked me to tell the world their story, that they don't want to just survive, they want to live. If we can show the trailer, Jim, that would be fantastic. It'll show really the heart of what the story is about.
Jim, thank you.
No mundo não estão sabendo o que nós está passando aqui no Vale do Javari.
Greed is what has driven the invasion of other people's lands over the course of human history. In the past 30 years, we've lost 17% of the Brazilian Amazon.
When I was 9 years old, I went to the Amazon with my grandfather. 25 years later, I returned to the indigenous territory. If they disappear, so will that rainforest.
Morrendo nossos parentes.
A saúde que está uma situação crítica em atendimento à saúde das populações indígenas.
We do not need to repeat history. If I truly believed in community and the interconnection of people in the world, I had to help tell his people's story. I had to go back to the jungle.
Bravo.
Merci.
Well, for me, this is very important because it's a highlight not only on people, but also on the environment, which they all depend upon.
Yeah.
And that to me is something that we, more than ever in this country or in the United States or wherever we are, we need to focus on it, because we, the human species, has this privilege to understanding what we're doing, the damage that we're creating, the mistakes that we've made, and make sure that we can change that and look in the eyes of all children, my grandchild, Felix, and them, and say, we'll do everything we can so you have the same privilege that we have had. And you know, a signal was being made to us by my father a long time ago when he was going to meeting many different people on the planet. And this is part of the show, by the way, that people can see if they want to. The people who made possible the dream of my father and also connected with decision makers. Several of them I had the privilege to meet with them afterwards, whether it's in industries or governments. Could we have that little video where my father literally told people we need to pay attention to the environment? And Jim, if we can have the next video. So that's where it all started.
As an early undersea witness, Jacques Cousteau saw for himself the abuses the sea was suffering. Only 27 years after his invention of the aqualine, he tried to warn us.
What we are facing is the destruction of the ocean by pollution and by other causes. If nothing was done today, maybe 30, 40, 50 years would be the end of everything.
So we have now, and I at Ocean Futures and you with your organization, we're trying to do everything we can, but we need to do even more and reach out more people who can make a difference. And young people particularly, they're very good because they can not only educate their family, but they can make decisions much better than they have made. And that's why I think symbolically, for the end of our presentation, I want to show a very, very short moment that we put together where we went and celebrated the 100th birthday of Jacques Cousteau, and where people symbolically came to join us and make that dive exactly where we started having major impact on sharing the ocean with the world. Could we have the next video, please? These are the old timers and our family and people who could not dive or didn't dive that day. But we all went there.
Now, as we slip into the sea on my father's birthday, we celebrate the fact that his true legacy is a passion passed on through his words, actions, and images that became a philosophy, a commitment, and a call to action that unites us all.
Well, that was a great opportunity for us to share that with the public, and we'll do even a lot more, because in the next 20 years or more, I will continue diving, and Céline will continue protecting the diversity of our species, which is fundamental and very symbolic of nature, whether it's plants or animals. And the diversity is synonymous of stability. And that's very, very critical. So Céline, I'd like you to tell us a little more about the adventure that you had the privilege of sharing with other people.
Well, I love the idea of humans being counted amongst the biodiversity of this planet, because I really feel through the experience that I've had with the indigenous people in the Amazon is to really show that people are capable of tremendous good, and that there are areas in the world where the presence of humans is actually beneficial to the land. What I learned through this whole project, several things that I think are just very key for us to remember. In a very simple way, you know, if you think about breathing, about 50% of our oxygen comes from the oceans, from microscopic phytoplankton, the other 50% from land. And so we owe our very life to the ecosystem on which we live, and we become part of it through that breath. 1 in 5 breaths comes from the Amazon specifically. And where there are indigenous people in the Amazon, there's no deforestation. There's actually less deforestation on indigenous land than there is on conservation land. So we can really start to understand our link to these different ecosystems above and below water, to the people that protect these ecosystems, whether it's through NGOs, science, or indigenous peoples. And our relationship with the planet depends on its well-being. Our well-being depends on it. I think in all of the work that we have done for 3 generations, it really comes down to that. And as you've said, Papa, no biodiversity, no diversity, no life, both in human terms and in planetary terms. So at the end of the day, that's really what we're trying to protect and the work we're trying to continue doing. We can't do it alone, obviously. I was happy enough to be able to take time last year to write my first book, which is only in French at the moment, but it's called Le Monde après mon grand-père, the world after my grandfather. I didn't want to write another biography. It's not about him. It's about the world after him and what we as a family have done, and in essence, the inheritance that we share with all of you. And that's really the important part, is you're a part of the story too.
It's funny that you got your book out, and at the same time, I finished a book which was
Yes.
published in different parts of the world,
Yeah.
which is called The Sea in Us. The Sea in
Mm.
Us. Anyway,
Yeah.
so I think we now have gone way beyond what we were supposed to do time-wise, but I'm so excited to be able to try to answer some questions which some of the people have submitted. And if Jim can help us, let's get some of those questions. Thank you very, very much. And I'm so glad we can share that with you. And if you want to see my Father the Captain film, that's the time to do it.
Okay, good job, Jean-Michel and Céline. That was really nice. And I have to say, there are lots of people glowing online that are saying thank you to both of you for your presentation. And so many of them are our friends and colleagues and people we've worked with. And so thank you all for showing up. We appreciate you guys being here. And we have people attending, for the ones at least put their location up, from France and Idaho, Paradise, California, Long Island, New York, Maine, Salt Lake City, Michigan, Athens, Greece, and Ventura, California.
Awesome.
So that's really cool that through this technology, we can reach out to the world in these strange times. And that's part of the inspiration for the festival, is that, you know, with COVID-19 happening, we can all still get together and we can all still be inspired. One of our viewers is in Lexington, Massachusetts, and she's with 20 kids in the Ocean Science Club. And so their question is, what practical advice could you give for youngsters? I believe they're in 8th or 9th grade. What could they do to make a difference?
Oh, wow.
My opinion, and I'm sure you have your opinion, Céline, or maybe it's helping each other. For me, education is absolutely critical, because young people are like sponges. They absorb, it gets in there. And I remember things I was doing when I was 5 or 6 years old in south of France. And I can tell those stories. I think the best investment that we can do is to provide teachers with all the information that they can pass on to young people. And that, to me, is what we're doing with different places on the planet, but with the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, where we have a program, Ambassador of the Environment. We also have on an island, the Catalina Island, the program which is called CELP, Catalina Environmental Leadership Program. We have the family camp, and we are on and on and on. But it's all focusing on either the kids or the parents to pass on the message to the children. So your turn.
No, I definitely agree. I think education is key. And I would say that students can utilize their presence in schools to request their schools to have more environmental education as part of their curriculum. They don't have to wait for it to come from top down. Now, with access to so much information, we're no longer in the dark about what happens on the other side of the planet, but it is up to the educational institutions to offer more, I think, more education in a more profound way as to our relationship with the planet, the importance of biodiversity, the importance of people, the importance of different species. So that would be one, like ask your school to give you more content, more information. Two, as just an individual, if you're in 8th and 9th grade, you have the ability to probably go out and clean up beaches, or educate your parents, like open up your cupboards and get rid of single-use plastics, just say no more. Look at what all the ingredients in your food in your cupboards and educate yourself on, for example, palm oil or soy and the destruction of rainforests. And tell your parents, like, no more palm oil. Let's try to like take all of this out of our system. You can start raising funds, I think, for organizations, or volunteer your time, or start looking at career paths or even volunteer opportunities within organizations or projects that you're passionate about. It doesn't have to be what we're talking about today, what we're passionate about. But I think if you develop an interest in something, follow that through. And if you're interested in being a doctor, an accountant, or a lawyer, all of those skills, that expertise can be really supportive towards different environmental and humanitarian projects. So don't think you just have to follow a path within the environmental realm. We all need to band together to support. 2 thumbs up.
Very good, very good. And since I mentioned earlier, now people are saying where they're from, and there's Puerto Rico, Connecticut, Texas.
Nice.
It's really cool, all the different people that are tuning in. So Céline, there's a question for you, and that is, how has COVID-19 affected the indigenous?
So I work in one specific area. The Vale do Javari territory is in Brazil. It's in the western corner at the border with Colombia and Peru. So just if you want to take a look at a map at some point, you can see where it is. It's 85,000 square kilometers, which is about the size of Portugal or Austria. And in the United States, it's almost the size of Maine. So you can see sort of the notion. COVID has entered the territory. So I'm in contact with Beto from the Marubo tribe on a regular basis through WhatsApp. Actually, he lives in Brasilia. So he's a bit of the connector to the region for me and for a lot of programs. What he has told me just last week is that COVID-19 has affected the indigenous people in this territory, but for some reason they are getting either mild or moderate forms of repercussions. So they're needing, some of them needing to be on oxygen, but they're not getting these violent or these more death-provoking reactions. So the bad news is that it's arrived in the middle of the jungle. The somewhat odd news is that it has seemed to propagate without going really extreme. The worry, however, within all of that, is that there is a recently contacted group called the Kurubo, who have only been contacted since about 2015, which is very recent contact. They have absolutely no immune system for the flu or cold, much less COVID-19. So what they're doing is they're trying to keep them isolated from the other groups. And they are actually, I just got this the other day, they're actually building a hospital boat specifically to attend the Kurubo and nobody else, so that they can continue to attend the most vulnerable. So it's touch and go, but thanks to NGOs on the ground in Brazil, PPE, so protective gear has been delivered to the area, as well as oxygen tanks and ventilators. So they're getting some support. They're missing funding to finish the boat, but so far the response has been positive.
Very good. Jean-Michel, can you tell us what you think are the major environmental issues that are that's affecting our planet today, like one of the biggest?
Major environmental issue, right?
Yes.
Issues.
What's the greatest issue of our time?
Oh, wow.
Well, the good news is that you have 9 billion people or so that can be connected with each other. We can no longer cheat, lie, or steal. We can get caught. So environmentally, it's very critical for us to realize that we have to make major decisions in the near future in a very successful way, from an educational point of view, from an economical point of view, and from a political point of view. You know, when you're elected, you elect it for a year or a few years, and your obsession is very short term. When you're in a business, you want to make money, money, money now. Well, we need to help these people make the bridge with the future, and we can do that. When before we couldn't do it or we didn't know. And there are all new ways of taking advantage of the energy that nature produces without creating pollution. And whether it has to do with the currents, the wind, the sun, and on and on and on, we are heading in that direction. We need to accelerate there. And there are people who want to make money in a business, and they should go ahead and do it. We need to head in that direction as quickly as we can. So education is part of it. And of course, sitting down with decision makers, whether it's in government or industries, and helping them make the bridge between what they're doing now and the future. We're not trying to have them lose their job or lose their business. That's not the point. The point is to think much longer term for every species on the planet, which we all depend upon. And it's a very exciting time. It's a very tough, very difficult, because we are now faced up with the mistakes that we have made and the consequences of those mistakes. But we know what they are, and we can repair that and start to come up with much, much better decision. And there are people who are heading in that direction. It's a very exciting time.
Céline, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to identify any one specific environmental concern as the most important because everything's interconnected. I think one of the biggest issues is that our human consciousness is not shifting fast enough to understand that all of this matters. And I keep thinking whenever we think in really big terms in terms of what's happening to our planet, and we can talk about climate change, we can talk about ocean pollution. Overconsumption is a huge one, unsustainable consumption, the food waste, all of that. But it all gets tied into one system that our behavior needs to shift. And if we are apathetic or we think somebody else is doing it, then that's probably the biggest danger. There's something called, it's not called the witness effect. I don't have the proper term in mind right now. But where essentially the more people are witnessing a disaster, the less people are acting, because the more they assume somebody else is doing it. Don't assume somebody else is fixing something. Just start, because your behavior starts a chain reaction of other people's positive behavior. Lonnie Thompson is a glaciologist that my father and I interviewed in 2006, 2007 for Return to the Amazon. And in looking at the tropical ice caps, for example, they were melting at a completely unsustainable rate and much faster than ever before due to changing temperatures. And I asked him, I said, Lonnie, do you think we're going to be able to react in time? And, as far as climate change is concerned, and alarmingly, he said, unfortunately, human beings don't react until their back is up against the wall. And when it comes to climate change, that's just too late. So don't wait. Shift the consciousness now. Shift from being a bystander to an actor. I think that's going to be what enables us to move forward in a healthy way, both physically, mentally, and on the planet.
I will never, if I can jump in, I will never forget when we were in the Amazon in those days. And I remember taking your brother, Fabien, on a boat, and we went where Calypso couldn't go. And we went all the way up to the top of one of those mountains, Mount Mismi, which is believed to be the one further out sources of the Amazon. There are 9 countries contributing to it. But very interesting, we had a scientist who was taking samples of that water that was coming down that river from Mount Mismi and into the Amazon. And he was able, to make a long story, to follow that all the way into the Atlantic and all the way up to England. So Mount Mismi was connected to England. So there's one single water system which we all depend upon. And the Amazon is a very, very symbolic place for us to understand that we need to do the right thing to protect ourselves and protect, of course, by protecting the people and the land and the plants and animals that are into the Amazon or on the land is protecting us. And that's what it's all about.
Very good. Parting thoughts on the legacy of Jacques Cousteau? Anything to add? I know, in putting these ads together and promoting the event, the number of people that say, I grew up watching Jacques Cousteau, people have been so affected by his programs and his environmental message that it's really amazing that what he accomplished in his life, and is one of the forefathers of an environmental movement to take care of our planet.
Well, okay, all I can say is that we want to help.
Yeah.
We're there to help, to do everything we can to help, and we're glad that people are concerned more and more, and we want to do whatever we can to help them make better decisions than we have made in the past. Other than my daughter, I never make mistakes.
Other than wait, I was waiting for the rest of the sentence.
We all make mistakes, so we have to admit that and do everything we can to slow that down. And it's interesting because here you are in south of France right now. I am in California, in the United States. We could never do that when we were in the Amazon when you were a kid.
No.
It's amazing.
I mean, the rate at which things change for the good or not, but in terms of what you're talking about, in terms of technology, I mean, when, so many years ago in the early 80s, there was no accessibility communications wise, and now we can be anywhere and have this kind of contact, and which is an amazing thing because we can share these stories far and wide. Jim, to address that question about the legacy of our family, when people say, oh, you're so lucky to be in this family, et cetera, I said, but anybody who has been inspired is part of it. And you just said it, you're like, I hear this all the time, no matter what country I go to. Oh, I grew up with your grandfather. I'm like, really? I did too. That's amazing. Well, and you start to realize the legacy isn't about blood relatives. A legacy is about what inspires you and what you do with it. I could have been born in this family and done something different. I studied psychology. I studied intercultural relations. I utilize all of that now back in the context of what I'm doing, putting humans at the center of the environmental story. But anybody who says, oh, I grew up with your grandfather, or one day they'll say, I grew up with your father, I grew up with you. Well, what do you do with that? Do you become an ocean advocate? Do you become an indigenous ally? Are you recycling? Are you composting? I mean, I think that all of that really matters for you to embody what it is that you're inspired by.
Well, what it means is that those people can help a lot. And thanks to them taking the time to absorb whatever information we can pass on, they'll be making better decisions, and that's what we want to do.
Yeah.
And we can
I just thought of, Pam Stacy was the writer for My Father, the Captain, Jacques-Yves Cousteau. Yeah. And the clip we played at the end has a really good, some narration in there that you were reading, Jean-Michel, written by Pam. And it says that we celebrate the fact that his true legacy is a passion passed on through his words, actions, and images that became a philosophy, a commitment, and a call to action that unites us all.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pam.
Pam is amazing. I think this is the, going back to the beginning of this talk and some of the photographs, and I keep going back to this image of an iceberg, is that the people behind the scenes, Pam, the production teams, the scientists, the people in the field, they all made this possible. we have an amazing opportunity to have platforms in which to share these stories and share this information and share the expertise of those who are in the field. But it's the team that makes it possible. And to not acknowledge that is to not honor what it takes to get to where we all are today.
And so a lot of what we presented today were photos of the family history and both of your take on your grandfather and father. And a lot of what this show, My Father the Captain, has is how Jeek, as he was referred to, affected many people. And so there's a portion of this documentary where people like James Cameron and Sylvia Earle and others talk about how he influenced their life. And so it's not only really a historical perspective of Jacques Cousteau, but really about how he influenced us and changed the lives of many people.
Well, for me, it was a privilege to be able to go and connect with not only the past members of the team, but people who are part of the movement on the planet to change the way we treat that environment and which we all depend upon. And of course, with our mission of Ocean Futures, which is if you protect the ocean, you protect yourself. And that is everybody, every human being, every plant, every animal on the planet is totally connected to that water system. So that's where I was so pleased to do that show and very much helped by those people who contributed to making the film.
And also included in the film is interviews with original crew of Calypso, which is pretty fascinating. And Jean-Michel had the idea to make the film, because many of those people wouldn't be around forever, and to go and to interview them and get their stories is included in the show. And also is some never before seen footage that Jean-Michel, that Jacques Cousteau gave to Jean-Michel and was in his attic, shot in 1938 and in 1943, some before scuba was even invented. And I had the fortunate experience to take that down to LA. And it was little reels of silver nitrate, 35 millimeter film that Jacques Cousteau had taped together to put in his camera around World War II. And some of those shots are the earliest underwater scenes ever recorded. And those are in the show. And so lots of reasons to check out this program, as well as some of the other films on the Ocean Futures Virtual Film Festival site. And we're at the top of the hour. So I think I'll say thank you both for sharing your thoughts on the film and for taking part today. And to everybody who joined in from all over, we appreciate your support and your involvement. And we hope you'll attend possibly our next live event, which would be February 24th for Swains Island, one of the last jewels of the planet, which tells the story of a tiny island 200 miles north of American Samoa that's recently added to the National Marine Sanctuary System. And we went there with a team of scientists who wanted to do a survey of the island, because it turns out that Swains Island was an important resting stop as Polynesians migrated to the rest of the Pacific using this important tiny island. So, so that's coming up in the future, and you can rent that on the site anytime you want. So thank you all for taking part. And with that, I guess any parting lines from you guys? We've said it all. All right, you guys. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and thank you both. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Jim. Thank you, Céline. I'm glad we could do that together.
So am I. So am I. It's a wonderful opportunity in the absence of physical presence, just to be able to do this and have a conversation. Thank you to everyone who attended as well.
Please say hi to the boss.
I will. The boss is sleeping.
You're talking which one?
The the little boss.
I'm thinking about Felix, of course.
Oh
But-
yeah, it's 10 p.m. here. He's long into dreamland.
But Chapkin also was very involved in many of our expeditions.
Yeah.
So thank you, the three of you. Bye.
All right,
Bonne
guys.
nuit. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.